It's hard to believe that a quiet street, where I taught my daughter to ride her bike, would one day feel like a war zone. A place that once felt so safe, so peaceful, would become the battleground for something I could never have predicted. Emma had just turned 18, and she was already growing into a woman with a heart as fierce as her mother's, driven by a sense of justice that ran deep. She was tall, her dark ponytail swinging as she laughed while talking to her phone, live streaming to an online audience. This wasn't the first time Emma had taken to social media to expose the corrupt HOA enforcers who had been tormenting our neighbors with outrageous fines. I've always been the cautious type, especially after my years of military service. So, I'd warned her, repeatedly, that not every fight needs to be fought in front of strangers online. But Emma, stubborn as ever, with that same fire I had when I was her age, wasn't about to back down. She believed that if she could just show people the truth, someone, somewhere, would step in and put a stop to the nonsense. The night everything changed started off just like any other evening in our small town. The sun had just dipped below the rooftops, and the air felt heavy, thick, like it was holding its breath. I sat on the porch, enjoying the last bits of daylight, while Emma did what she did best, filming and chatting into her phone, trying to catch the HOA enforcers on camera again. It was a regular occurrence. The truck had been circling for days, taunting the neighborhood with its menacing presence. I didn't think much of it until I heard it. The rumble of an engine, but not the usual sound of a passing car. This was different. It was low, heavy, the sound of a vehicle coming too fast. My gut twisted, a sense of dread creeping up my spine. I stepped outside, squinting at the dimming street. That's when I saw it. A black pickup truck, headlights low and wide, came careening down the street. The flashers on the roof flickered, casting a strange red-blue glow across the sidewalk. The decals on the doors read HOA enforcement, their letters peeling and ragged. I'd seen that truck around before, but tonight, it wasn't just cruising. This time, it was hunting. Emma was still oblivious, talking to her phone, focused on her live stream. I shouted her name, but the roar of the truck drowned me out. My heart hammered in my chest as I ran down the porch steps, my boots pounding against the pavement. I knew, deep down, that I wouldn't make it in time. I watched as the truck accelerated, climbing the curb as though it were nothing more than a small bump in the road. It fishtailed across the lawn, heading straight for her. In that moment, everything seemed to slow down, time stretching out, like the world was holding its breath too. Emma froze for just a second, the bike tipping beneath her, her legs caught in the pedals. She tried to leap out of the way, but it was too late. The truck slammed into her, clipping her hip and sending her spinning. The rear tire rolled over both of her legs with a sickening thud. The sound of her scream cut through me, deeper than anything I had ever heard before. It hit me like a punch to the gut, and every instinct I had kicked in. I knew I needed to get to her, fast. I kept running, but I was already too far behind. As I reached the driveway, I saw her body on the ground, pale, twisted in a way I knew wasn't right. The truck didn't stop. Instead, it revved its engine again, as if it was getting ready for a second round. My blood went cold. I didn't have time to think. The years of Navy SEAL training I had buried deep inside me rushed to the surface in an instant. I reached for the gun I kept locked in the hall closet for moments like this. I knew it was time to use it. I took my stance by the mailbox, feet firm on the ground. The air seemed thick around me as I focused on the truck, my hands steady on the grip of the Glock. I aimed for the front left tire. A single breath in, a breath out, and I squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, loud in the quiet evening. The truck's front left tire exploded with a sharp hiss, the vehicle swerving uncontrollably before it crashed into a neighbor's flower bed. For a moment, there was silence, save for the sound of Emma's sobs. I backed toward her, my gun still leveled in case the driver tried anything else. The door to the truck swung open, and a man in a cheap tactical vest jumped out, holding a shotgun. He looked like he was ready to kill. "Put the gun down," He barked through a bullhorn, his voice cracking. "I've got your daughter in my sights." I didn't flinch. "Drop the weapon," I said, my voice low but firm. "You're done. EMS is on the way. You so much as twitch, and you'll regret it." There was a hesitation in his eyes, a brief moment of uncertainty. It was enough for me to know I had the upper hand. The driver stayed in the truck, shouting something I couldn't hear, but I could feel the tension thickening around us. It wasn't over. Not yet. I turned and moved toward Emma, keeping myself between her and the truck. She was still conscious, but barely. Her face was pale, and I could see the pain in her eyes. "Stay with me, kiddo," I said, my voice softer now. "Paramedics are on their way. You're safe now." I tried to reassure her, even as the sirens wailed in the distance. The flashing lights of the police cars grew louder, but I knew this wasn't finished. The danger was far from over. The next few days were a blur. After everything that had happened, I couldn't just sit back and hope for the best. I started gathering everything I could: photos, documents, the Polaroids they'd been slipping under our door, the audio from the police body cams that captured Billy Kane's voice giving orders. The same Billy Kane I had once trusted, who had once fought beside me on battlefields far from home. Now, he was behind this, leading a crew of criminals, harassing families for money and terrorizing anyone who stood in their way. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deep this went. The HOA wasn't just a nuisance. It was a front for a criminal operation. I needed to take action. Emma's livestream had already brought some attention to this issue, but I needed to make sure this went public. I started working with local reporters, sharing everything I had gathered. The story spread like wildfire, and soon the whole neighborhood was awake to the truth. People who had been too scared to speak up came forward with their own stories of fines for nothing, threats in the dead of night, and intimidation. The neighborhood that had once been filled with silent, fearful people was beginning to stand up for itself. But the real reckoning came when the trial began. Emma, despite her injuries, insisted on attending. She wheeled into the courthouse, her legs in bright white casts, but her face filled with the quiet determination I knew so well. She wasn't just a victim. She was the reason this story was even being told. The courtroom was packed with neighbors, reporters, and strangers who had followed the story online. Billy Kane, now in a county-issued jumpsuit, sat across from us, his face twisted in an expression that was hard to read. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected Emma to be the one to expose him. The prosecution laid out everything: the fake fines, the threats, the night Emma was attacked, the recordings of Billy's voice on the radio, the photos, the live stream footage. Every piece of evidence was there, and with each one, I could see Billy's face falter. When it was Billy's turn to speak, he tried to spin the whole thing as a mistake, as if he was some kind of vigilante doing what the system had failed to do. But nobody bought it, not with the evidence staring them in the face. After 4 days of testimony, the jury took only 2 hours to deliberate before returning with a guilty verdict. Billy Kane was convicted of aggravated assault, conspiracy, and child endangerment. The other 2 men, Reyes and Connor, were convicted of reckless endangerment and impersonating law enforcement. I didn't feel relief in that moment. There was no moment of triumph. It was just a quiet, hard-earned justice. Emma squeezed my hand when the verdict was read, but she didn't smile. Not yet. Not when the fight was still ongoing. Not when Billy was still out there, running the operation. The months that followed were slow, like the town itself was breathing again for the first time. Emma's casts came off, and she worked hard to regain her strength. The neighborhood began to rebuild itself. 2 neighbors who had been too scared to speak up found their voices. The whole board got replaced, and they hired legitimate security for the first time. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Yet, every now and then, I'd catch myself looking down the street, half expecting that black pickup to reappear. But it never did. It wasn't easy. The scars, both physical and emotional, lingered. But what mattered was that we were still here, still standing. Emma still limps a little when she walks, but she says it makes her look mysterious, and I can't help but smile at her resilience. When we finally walked down to the lake together, just the two of us, I knew that it wasn't just the street that had healed. It was us, too. And the fight we'd fought together, the fight she'd led, was something we'd never forget.